Welcome to Football Unspoken, the home of unique football takes. How's it, Josh? So today I want to talk to you about managers. But before we get into managers, as at the time of recording, this is during the Euros, I want to ask you a Euros-related trivia question. Can you tell me which team holds the most wins for the Euros competition? Who's won the Euros the most?
Is it Italy?
No, I'm not gonna lie. It's a bit of a trick question because there's actually two who share it. Spain and Germany have both won it 3 times.
Oh, I mean, that's a bit of a dire attempt then for me. If there's two countries that have neither.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trick question to be fair. But launching from that, obviously in this Euros, especially living in England at the moment, you hear a lot about Gareth Southgate and his kind of managerial style. And then during the Premier League, you also hear a lot about how, for a Newcastle fan, Eddie Howe only wants to play one way. How Pochettino, he struggles because he doesn't have a backup plan. And so my question to you is, do managers in the modern era need a plan B?
Oh, that's a great question. So I want to start on the Southgate thing for a second, and then I want to move over to the more direct question because I think those are two separate discussions. I don't want to get held up on the Southgate one, but something I do want to mention. England's bigger problem, or Southgate's bigger problem, was his squad selection before the tournament than actually the squad itself, because there's no lack of ability in that squad. And tactically, I don't think it's a completely inept tactical approach from Southgate. I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying it's not disaster. But where I think the squad the squad selection was a disaster was you look at left back. They've got one left-footed left back in the squad, and that's Luke Shaw. And the bloke's come into the tournament injured. So now you have to play a right-footed left back. And the opposition know every time that player is going to get the ball, he's going to look to cut in. It's so easy to cut out that passing lane. I don't care if you're Dani Alves or some other right back or right-footed left back. It doesn't change anything. You just know where his passing lanes are. You cut that out immediately. And the same actually goes for the left wing position. They've taken out Rashford and all the other right-footed left wingers. So now they're playing Foden left-footed on the left wing. They know they want him to cut in because he's going to be on his weaker foot now. He's not going to shoot or do anything productive with that. So they've completely hamstrung themselves with the squad selection before the tournament even started, to be honest. Because now on the right, people said, say, Walker and Arnold plus Saka have done nothing. But all the passes have to come down that wing, so the opposition can just double up on the man marking that side and kind of leave the other side. Anyway, so like I said, there's a whole other discussion. I just wanted to touch on that quickly. And then on managers requiring, should they have a plan B, I think it's very clear that the answer is no. It goes both ways. But if you look at the ultimate example is maybe Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola doesn't have a plan B. And that's where that debate comes in about, if Pep Guardiola went to go manage in the Championship or League One, how would he really do? He probably wouldn't do that well because his versatility as a manager is quite low. But the fact that he's so irate about this one style of football, and that's how we play no matter the results, has kind of yielded him the success he's had so far as a manager.
Okay, so I don't want to touch on the Southgate thing because that will be an entirely different discussion, but I do essentially agree with everything you said there. As for the manager side of it, would you say then, just because I tend to agree with what you're saying, but on the other side of it, would you say that managers without a plan B need to have the money to back it?
Yeah, definitely. We're a manager who I've been really surprised at in terms of he hasn't stuck to his guns and it so far hasn't really worked as well as it should have, is Ten Hag at Manchester United. You know, he came in from Ajax, very clear style of play, and we haven't seen that style of play at all since he's come to United. He has been asked about it, and he said, well, I don't have the players to do it at United. Now, I think that's a bit of a weak cop-out, and that's not me having a go at Ten Hag. I'm just saying, if he believes in that philosophy of football, he should be working towards that year on year. They're coming 8th in the league anyway. Like, how much worse could it be? Maybe they wouldn't have won the titles, the FA Cups, and that they've won so far. But how much worse could it have been in the league? And I think then you can see progress year on year. That's something where Arteta did it quite well, where year on year he stuck to the same plan. It didn't work out initially, came 8th a couple of times, and then he kind of got it together as he got the players. But maybe using that Arteta example, it shows what you're saying in terms of Arteta clearly was backed financially, spent a lot of, I don't know the exact number, I believe it's in the 300 to 500 million range that he spent since being Arsenal manager. Not a small amount of money, and they spent that money well, but they've still spent a huge amount of money to get there. So I would argue the answer is yes. I can't think of an example now where a manager has transformed a team into what you'd consider a title winning team without spending a huge amount of money just based on philosophy. Because the only other examples I can think of is you think of a De Zerbi coming into Brighton. Funny enough, Graham Potter was there. They came in very clear ways of football and improved the squads quite dramatically. Even Emery at Aston Villa. But all of those none of those teams have become title winning so far. So and then they haven't spent the money along with it.
Yeah, like I said, I tend to agree with a lot of what you say. I will say the one thing that I potentially think is not spoken about enough in terms of managers is their ability to adapt to the times, and I believe is why we struggle to see so many longevity managers. You know, you don't see the Arsene Wengers and the Alex Fergusons anymore, because Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger, they went from a time period where it was hard football, you know, it was really aggressive, really in your face, and they had to adjust to your like late 2000s, where it was more skill-based players coming into the league. You know, it probably started with your Thierry Henrys coming into the league and being really skilled, really quick, all that kind of stuff. And you started seeing teams build around that. And I think that's when Alex Ferguson shifted from his midfield of, you know, the Roy Keane style players and the kind of in-your-face, really aggressive Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira style players, to where he ended up with, I mean, his last team wasn't great, but, you know, when Scholes started becoming a bit more, I wouldn't say prominent, but, you know, it was more those skill-based players, those Ronaldos, those Nannies, that's where you started really having your core. And I think that's where the adaptation element comes in. And I think Pep Guardiola is probably the only manager at the moment who you could say is being consistently successful over a long period of time. And it is because he might not have a plan B, but he does change it. You know, Haaland wouldn't have fit into his team 6 years ago, you know, when he had Aguero. I don't think Haaland would have replaced Aguero very well at all. I think they had to go through that period of false nines before bringing in Haaland in and showing, actually, we can still play this with a striker. This is how we are going to play. We're going to now adapt to the rest of the league because they've now figured out our false nine, or not figured it out, but he doesn't want them to figure it out. So we're going to get a big striker out front now. And I don't think that a lot of managers have that adaptability. And they probably also don't have the money to be able to adapt that way. But I think that's where I don't agree with this idea of a plan B, but I do think you need to adapt. And this is where I'm going to go into Southgate, because I think, yeah, this is the team he's picked. And it's worked to the point where they're through, but it's not been successful. You couldn't say that they've had a successful group campaign. And this is where you sit back and you go, right, playing Foden, playing Trippier is not working. So rather than scrap everything and start again, who do I have in this squad? I have Anthony Gordon, who's a left winger, and he's going to run at defenses. Let's get someone who's going to actually run at defenses and put them on their back foot. We've got Cole Palmer, who needs to be used more. I don't think he needs to be a starter. I think Saka's still the starter, but he definitely needs to be coming on more. And I think that's where your adaptability comes in. And it's not necessarily a plan B. You're not changing everything, but you're allowing the team to adapt to the needs of the tactics, if you understand what I mean.
So in my opinion, there's a difference between having a plan A and a plan B and being able to adapt your tactics over time, as in having that ability to look at what we did last season or in the first half of a season, how can we improve on that? And with the examples you gave with Guardiola, I think we've seen over the years, his style has slightly adapted and improved. You look at that original Barcelona team, all tiki-taka, 90% possession, but sometimes they would hit a 0-0, right, and lose titles or not get past an Inter Milan because they didn't have that kind of hardcore direct, get the goal at the end of it sometimes. So he's kind of adapted on that, So examples, this is a defensive one, but still fascinating. he was the one who brought this idea of playing 4 centre-backs across your back four. Nathan Ake is at left back and other players like that. So you go with 4 centre-backs who are quite skillful. And that was quite interesting to me. If you look at Wenger, he was so dead set on his one style that when that style became less effective in his later seasons, both in the transfer market, by the way, and on the field tactic, he didn't adapt fast enough to the times. And I believe that's a criticism that Jose Mourinho has come under in his later years as a manager, where people have said, fantastic manager in the early 2000s. But as the games developed, his style hasn't necessarily developed with it. And he's fallen a little bit away, or his edge has fallen away a little bit. So that's where I say the real top managers, and I include Jurgen Klopp on this, because if you look at his first iteration of a Liverpool team, it was quite different to his final iteration of a Liverpool team. You look at that midfield and the style there. So I think the top managers have one plan for the season and they stick with it. Example of that was Man City this past season. They didn't have good results in the first half of the season. Guardiola didn't change the style. He kept his plan A. He believed the Haaland system would work in the end, but he gave it time. And I think, so that's where other managers, they'll go, oh, it hasn't worked in the first half of the season, got to do some dramatic changes. He doesn't. He sticks with it. But he does innovate in the off-season and periods like that, where other managers, so it's such a fine line. You've got to innovate in the quiet times. You've got to find time to innovate. But it's not about panicking, just removing your plan altogether.
Yeah, I tend to agree. This is why I kind of wanted to bring this topic up, because I think there's a lot of talk, a lot of narrative around having this plan B. But when I look back at our top managers, when you're talking about your Alex Ferguson's, your Jose Mourinho's, your Pep Guardiola's, your Jurgen Klopp's, they had a set style. Tiki-taka is Pep Guardiola. Total football, was Johan Cruyff. Gegenpress is, and they get these tactics named because they consistently use them and they consistently use them well. And I think, having the team and the budget to be able to pull those off makes a big difference. But at the same time, Jurgen Klopp has had to work his way up to that management position to be able to say, I've created Gegenpress. He may not have created it, but I've perfected Gegenpress to the point where Liverpool were one of the best teams in the world at their peak. But at the same time, they weren't stuck in a box. They were able to adapt it by bringing in different players and having certain players on the bench that bring in a different element. And that's not a plan B, but it's adapting to a situation. And you compare that to an Erik ten Hag, who I think he's been a little bit done by the media. I will say that. I don't think he's been bad, but I do think there's something to be said that they don't have their identity yet. There's kind of it's a counter-press identity, but I don't really know if it's supposed to be a long ball identity or a short ball, because he wants to have the goalkeeper who plays it short. But then they do this really weird thing where they leave quite a bit of space in the midfield so that they can hit a long ball in, and then your Bruno Fernandes takes the ball on the run. So it'll get knocked down, and then Fernandes gets it on the run and they get to move forward rather than playing at the back. And I think they're kind of stuck between two systems in that way. But yeah, I think last kind of question from my side on this is, realistically, do you think that having a plan B as a manager takes away from being able to implement the plan and the tactics that you really want to have?
I do. I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. So first of all, the players, you confuse the players when you have a plan B, because you start putting in their mind, why have a plan B if you believe in plan A that much? And then secondly, the media will be on you straight away. As soon as they see you switching and flapping and all of that, they're going to start saying you're not confident, and they start spewing these kind of stories. Now, you can't control the media, but I do believe that has an impact of creating pressure around the squad. And I know Ancelotti, the manager we haven't spoken about on this episode, but he was speaking, I think it was actually Frank Lampard after he got fired from Chelsea the first time. And Ancelotti said to Lampard, now you're a real manager because you've been fired for the first time. Because Ancelotti's point was he'd been fired at pretty much everywhere. Chelsea, Real Madrid the first time. In Italy, he'd been fired from AC Milan. So his point was, you have a style, you go in there, you implement it to your best of your ability. And sometimes it doesn't work at that club in that moment and with that squad. It doesn't necessarily mean that your strategy is bad or wrong. You could be Jurgen Klopp And as you said earlier, you just don't have the right players to implement the strategy, but you believe in that style of football so much, or you manage a team with that style of football so well that you're going to stick with it no matter what. Instead of relinquishing your values as a football manager, you just accept sometimes it was the wrong team for those strategies.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think we kind of end this episode on as we started it, just kind of agreeing with the ideas that we both had. But it was interesting to hear your points and hear your views on it. As for our listeners, I'd love to hear their thoughts and opinions. If you agree, if you disagree, just leave us a like, comment, share us to your friends, your family, and from us to you. Have a great week.